My son gave me the strength to move forward and leave the past behind. Today I am free and happy. I remember exactly the day I broke down. It wasn't the silent kind of crying. It was that breakdown that comes when everything you believed in crumbles all at once. I was 7 months pregnant, tired, with back pain, and hadn't been able to sleep well for weeks. And yet, I stayed home alone because Ricardo, my husband, said he was going to a college alumni reunion. He always talked so much about his college days. I didn't really question it, but the way he left, without looking me in the eye, all rushed. I felt something strange. I just didn't want to admit it to myself at that moment. I spent the whole Saturday alone, trying to distract myself. But pregnant, tired, with a huge belly, there are times when we don't even have the energy to watch TV. I wasn't feeling well. The pregnancy was taking a toll, and he knew it. Early in the evening, I decided to browse social media a bit, just to pass the time. The first thing that popped up was an Instagram post from Fabiana, his ex. A photo of her in a restaurant, smiling. So far, so good. But then I saw the caption, "Unexpected reunion with old friends, a weekend to always remember." And in the stories, there was Ricardo, arm in arm with her, toasting. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I opened the video and saw him smiling at her camera, them laughing, her joking. Who would have thought, right? Ricardo? I felt my face burn. It wasn't just the lie, it was the contempt, the abandonment. I was pregnant with his child, and he was at dinner with his ex, as if I didn't exist. And I was alone, trying not to go into labor prematurely. In that moment, I didn't cry. I was in shock. You know when you feel like the world has stopped? I could only stare at the screen, unresponsive. At first, I thought about pretending I didn't see it. I can't explain it. It seemed easier to pretend nothing had happened, wait for him to come back, swallow hard. But then I remembered I'd done this before. Turn a blind eye to the strange conversations on my phone, the lame excuses about working on a holiday. And where had I ended up? Pregnant, left alone at home, while he was having fun with his ex-girlfriend. That's when I felt a sudden jolt, a rage so intense it instantly made me jump out of bed. I grabbed my phone and started taking screenshots of everything. My head was racing, my heart was racing, and I was terrified of getting sick. But I had to do it. I sent the screenshots to Gustavo, a mutual friend who had always been embarrassed by Ricardo's actions. I just said, "Is that what he went to do?" And Gustavo called me right away, without further ado. He confirmed there was no alumni reunion. It was just an excuse to see Fabiana again, that he'd been secretly messaging her for months. And then I truly broke down. But along with the tears came a bit of relief, because I wasn't crazy. I was being deceived, manipulated, and now I knew for sure. I hung up the phone and went to my parents' room. We live in the same apartment complex. I had the key. It was almost midnight, and I knocked on the door, crying. My mom opened the door, and all I could say was, "He's with his ex, Mom. He left me alone while pregnant and went to her." My mom hugged me, and Carlos, my dad, went white. They'd always been suspicious of Ricardo, but they'd never wanted to interfere. But this time, there was no way out. I was shaking. I couldn't even stand. And they told me I was going to stay there with them, that I didn't have to deal with anything alone anymore. I stayed at my parents' house, and the next day Gustavo sent me more screenshots, old messages he'd saved, where Ricardo spoke ill of me, saying I only knew how to complain, that Fabiana understood him better. My stomach churned as I read them, but at the same time, it was as if each screenshot lifted a weight off my shoulders. I finally saw what had been happening for so long, what I'd been denying to myself. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't a slip-up. It was a pattern. And I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to accept it anymore. The hardest part was facing my own fear. I was afraid of everything. The trial, raising a child alone, facing divorce while pregnant. But my worst fear was being trapped in a lie for the rest of my life. I knew it would be difficult, but I wasn't going to fool myself anymore. On Monday, I went to the registry office with my father and started the divorce process. With all the screenshots, Gustavo's help, and my parents' support. That morning, I cried a lot, but I also felt a strength I never imagined I had. The worst part was Ricardo coming home as if nothing had happened. I was no longer there. He thought I'd be waiting with dinner ready, like I always did. Only this time, he found a void. When he called me, I answered firmly and said, "Your things will be at the concierge?" and the divorce papers will arrive this week. He kept trying to stall me, making excuses, saying it was just an innocent encounter, that Fabiana needed support. I simply replied, "I'm the one who's pregnant and in need, but you chose her." I hung up and blocked him from everything. At first, he tried to act remorseful, texting my parents, making up stories about an emotional crisis, and playing the victim. But no one fell for it. Gustavo had already sent the evidence to Carlos. My father and even his father-in-law and mother-in-law learned the truth. Teresa, my mother-in-law, even tried to defend him at first, but when she saw everything, she went silent. Jose, my father-in-law, called me and apologized. He said I didn't deserve this. It was strange because I'd always felt alone in that family. But then I realized that even they were on the right side when they saw who Ricardo really was. It wasn't easy, you know. There were days when I cried my eyes out, when I felt anger, humiliation, that horrible feeling of failure. I wondered where I'd lost myself, how I'd endured so long being belittled, hearing him say I was difficult, that I complained too much. But I also looked at my belly and thought of my son. He deserved a strong mother, a happy mother, not a broken woman next to a man who didn't even respect the basics. That's what held me together when my head felt like giving out. The divorce process went faster than I imagined, because with all the evidence, he didn't even have much to contest. And the crazy thing is, once everything started moving forward, I started seeing things I hadn't even noticed before. Friends who had always been suspicious, relatives who noticed he was ignoring me, even neighbors who had seen him leaving at odd hours. It was as if, for the first time, I was seeing the world without the blindfold. It hurt, of course it hurt, but it was also liberating to understand that I wasn't crazy. I was just trapped in a well-constructed manipulation. My parents' support was essential. My mother, Marilia, never let go of my hand. My father was with me everywhere, never let me fall. And Gustavo, wow, I never imagined he would be so important. He not only helped me collect the evidence, but he was by my side every step of the way. He never tried to take advantage, never made a scene. He just wanted me away from Ricardo. I could see the anger in his eyes, which I also felt. He was the one who helped me with the lawyer, who explained everything I was entitled to. When I was lost, he pulled me back to reality. There was a moment during the first hearing when I was shaking all over, seeing Ricardo there, trying to play the victim, trying to turn things around. It shook me. But I also remembered every night I cried alone while he was working, every time he humiliated me, making me doubt myself. When I was able to open my mouth and tell the judge everything, show the evidence, I felt a strength rise up inside me. I was no longer the woman who accepted everything in silence. I was there, fighting for my respect, my peace, and my son. After that hearing, I left the courthouse crying, but it was a different kind of crying. It wasn't sadness. It was such relief that it felt like a ton had been lifted off my shoulders. The first thing I did was hug my mother, then Gustavo, and give thanks. I knew the road would still be difficult. I would still deal with hurt, anger, and bad memories. But I also knew I was free, that I had chosen to be happy, even in the midst of pain, and no one would ever take that away from me again. I returned to my parents' house, but with a different outlook. I began planning my new life, thinking about the baby's room, my goals, my job after my leave. Little by little, I began rebuilding myself. Each achievement was a step away from that life that was hurting me. Every smile I gave without fear was a victory. And before I knew it, I no longer cried, remembering Ricardo. I cried with happiness for having had the courage to leave that place. The most memorable thing was the birth of my son. I thought I would feel empty that day, that I would cry because his father wasn't there. But it was the opposite. When I held my son in my arms for the first time, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for not having sunk into a rotten relationship. Gratitude for having protected him in time. My parents were by my side, and so was Gustavo. I felt so surrounded by true love that I understood that true family isn't about putting a ring on your finger. It's about holding your hand when everything falls apart. Ricardo tried to contact me a few times after the baby was born. He tried to act like a present, a concerned father. But I was firm. I kept everything with a lawyer, no sweet talk. And when he saw I wasn't going to give in to manipulation, he disappeared. The judge ordered alimony and supervised visitation, but he gradually faded as I'd imagined. Anyone who wants true presence fights, goes after it, and he never did. And that's okay. I had my son, I had peace, I had support, and I didn't need anything else. I finally understood that absent presence hurts more than permanent absence. A year later, I look back and see how much I've changed. I'm no longer that woman who accepted lame excuses, who was terrified of being alone, who sacrificed herself to please others. Today, I'm a strong mother, a woman who knows what she wants. I managed to return to work, stabilize my finances, and even take courses I always wanted to take, but Ricardo said were a waste of time. I regained my friendships, my self-esteem, and most importantly, my freedom. And every time I look at my son, I remember that it was for him and for myself that I turned things around. There were days I thought I couldn't do it. There were nights I cried in secret so no one could see, but I never allowed myself to go back to that hole. And you know what's even crazier? Even Ricardo's family turned their backs on him. They started to see what I saw, and many apologized for the time they ignored me. But I don't hold a grudge. I just move on with my life. And if there's one thing I've learned in all this time, it's that no one needs to live with someone who makes you feel less than. We deserve peace, respect, and true love. Today, I help other women whenever I can. I've given advice to a friend who was in a toxic relationship. I've helped a neighbor who was going through a similar thing. Because I know the difference someone reaching out makes. What Gustavo did for me, I'll never forget. And I want to be that for someone. Because sometimes all we need is someone to say, "You're not crazy, you're not exaggerated, you're just stuck in something wrong and you deserve to get out of it." I'm still learning to heal. There are days when I have triggers. There are moments when I remember everything and feel a pang. But I look back on my journey and know I've already won. I won when I chose to leave, when I chose to prioritize myself, when I chose to give my son a happy mother, even if alone. And honestly, I'd much rather be a single mother than continue to sink alongside someone who belittled me every day. If you're reading this and feeling stuck, I just want to say that there is life after pain. There is happiness after disappointment. It's not easy, it's not quick, but it's possible. I'm living proof of that. If I manage to climb out of the deep, and pregnant, betrayed, and humiliated, so can you. No one deserves to live for crumbs. And today I can say with a peaceful heart, it was difficult, it was painful, but it was the best choice I ever made. I finished stronger, more aware, and above all, free. And that's what I wish for anyone going through something similar. The strength to get out, the courage to start over, and the freedom to be truly happy. Because living in peace is priceless, and I'll never give that up again.